My favorite hot dog that I've ever had was a Sonoran Dog in Tucson, Arizona. This bacon-wrapped hot dog is absolutely loaded with delicious ingredients like pinto beans, salsa verde, mayonnaise, and fresh vegetables. Since I don't want to have to travel to a different state every time I want one of these delicious hot dogs, I thought it would be cool to see if I could make an even better version of this hot dog at home, with of course a homemade bun and all the toppings and condiments made from scratch. So while I was in Tucson, I stopped by Buena Vida restaurant, which is making Sonoran-style hot dogs every single day. I talked with the chef Diego, and he let me know a few tips that I'll need to know in order to make this hot dog at home.
Hey guys, how you doing? My name is Diego Rivera from Tucson, Arizona. I have the restaurant Buena Vida, which means the good life, the great life, I should say. We're a Mexican restaurant here. I like to do like modern Mexican food with like an American modern twist to it. And then, of course, our Sonoran hot dogs.
Could you just break down like what is a Sonoran dog for someone who doesn't know what it is?
All right, so we call them Sonoran dogs because obviously they were originated in the Sonoran region of Mexico and Arizona, which is here. And then it got passed down across the border actually through food vendors. And it became very popular here in Tucson. Sonoran dog is a bacon-wrapped weenie in a baked bun topped with beans, onions, tomato, mustard, mayonnaise, and then a little bit of that tangy green sauce or salsa that we put on top.
And are all of those like essential parts of it, or is any of that like a twist that you put on?
No, all of those are essential part of it. If you want to be true to the Sonoran dog, you should stick with the original ingredients. This will be a classic original Sonoran dog.
Is anything special about the bun? Because I'm a bread guy. Anything unique, anything I should know about making this bun at home?
It's got to be fluffy, it's got to be nice. Between almost like a regular hot dog bun and a bombuelo, like a piece of bread you'll eat like with menudo or something, you know?
Okay.
So it's the cross between those two.
Soft, fluffy, big hot dog.
Yeah. And that's what makes the hot dog. So yeah, the bun's a really big issue. So yeah.
Sounds good. So I'm gonna see your Sonoran dog, and then I'll try to make one for myself.
All right, cool. All right, I'm excited.
Thanks. As I expected, Diego's Sonoran dog was absolutely amazing, and I'm gonna share a few tips that he showed me that I think took this hot dog to the next level and really made it taste so good. First of all, the bun was super fluffy and delicious, but he actually took some mayonnaise onto the hot dog bun and then seared that along with the hot dog while it was cooking. That gave a really delicious, almost caramelized crust to the bun, which made it extra just crunchy and crispy on the outside and made it feel like a step up from a typical barbecue hot dog. Then there was the bacon wrapped hot dog itself, which gave the hot dog a real crunch and salty like crispiness on the outside that you don't get with your average barbecue hot dog either. Then the pinto beans, they gave a real meatiness to this hot dog, an extra like starchiness that I thought was really cool. And then that was all balanced out with the freshness of the diced tomatoes and diced onions. And then beyond the toppings, where this hot dog really shined was the condiments. The mayo brought some creaminess, the yellow mustard brought a tanginess, and the jalapeno green sauce brought a spiciness that really balanced out this hot dog, just creating a perfectly balanced meal in one hot dog. So to make the best homemade version of this hot dog that I can, I'm going to focus on these areas. I'm going to make the fluffiest hot dog bun that I can possibly make. I'm going to make pinto beans from scratch. That means I'm using dry beans instead of canned beans. I'm going to season those with salt and cook them low and slow. And then I'm going to use fresh tomatoes and diced onions. I'm not going to mess with those too much. And then I'm going to make 3 homemade condiments, one that I've never made before. Homemade mayo, which I've made a bunch of times, and it's delicious homemade. I'm going to make salsa verde made with some roasted jalapeno peppers, which should be awesome. And then I'm going to make yellow mustard, just plain bottled yellow mustard. I'm going to make it from scratch, which turns out you can do when you look up the recipe. And I'm going to see if it takes this hot dog to the next level. All right, let's go to the kitchen. For the Sonoran-style hot dog bun, I'm using a recipe I got from a YouTuber, actually from Sonora, Mexico. So I'll link that recipe in the description. It's 500 grams of bread flour. Then I'm chunking in 50 grams of softened butter directly to the flour. This is a technique you usually see with pastry instead of bread, but I'm just going to go with it and see how it goes. Then 50 grams of white sugar, 10 grams of salt, 1 egg or 50 grams, and then 7 grams of instant yeast. That's 1 packet of yeast. I'm mixing everything right in the bowl, just adding 230 grams of room temperature water, giving it a stir with a spoon. Then I'm going to mix that in my stand mixer on low to number 2 speed for about 5 minutes. Once it's been kneaded for about 5 minutes, it'll all come together like this. I'm actually going to turn the stand mixer off and let the dough rest for another 5 minutes without any kind of kneading. That'll kind of help the dough to firm up. Then I'm kneading it for another 5 minutes after that 5 minutes rest. So a total of 10 minutes kneading and a 5-minute rest in between, and the gluten looks nice and developed. Then I'm just going to bring the dough together with my bench scraper into a nice tight ball. Then I'm going to cover that up and let it rest for about 10 minutes on the counter. Then I'm going to grease a bowl with a little bit of olive oil, transfer that ball into the bowl. I like to put it in a glass bowl just so I can see how much it's rising. Then I'm covering up the dough and I'm moving it to the fridge for a nice long cold proof. Then I was planning to let this cold proof overnight, but I guess I'm too used to sourdough because after just 3 hours, this yeasted loaf was totally doubled in size in the fridge. So I'm flattening it out on the counter and I'm planning to shape this into 8 equally sized pieces, or as equal as I can get them, just dividing it by eye into 8 pieces like that. Then each dough triangle, I'm just gonna kind of stretch and fold into a ball like this. And then I'm going to roll it into a tight ball on the counter with my hand like this. Just cupping my hand over the dough and rolling it into a nice tight dough ball. And I'll do that with each of the 12 pieces until they're all pre-shaped into a dough ball. And I'll cover them up and let them rest for about 10 minutes. And then it'll be time to shape these into the actual hot dog shapes. Now, I'm sure there's many ways to shape a hot dog bun, but this is just one method I've seen that's pretty simple. Just press down on the ball of dough with your one hand, pressing down firmly until it rolls into an oblong shape. Then you can switch to 2 hands and keep rolling, pushing down, giving pressure on both sides of the hot dog bun until eventually you've got something that looks like this. It's an oblong shape. Once it's about a little bit smaller than you want your finished hot dog bun to be, you can stop shaping because that is going to puff up in the oven and get a little bit bigger. Now here's that shaping method one more time, just pressing down with my hand, giving a lot of pressure, then switching to 2 hands. And eventually I've got this nice oblong hot dog shaped bun that I can fit nicely into my pan. And I'm trying to fit 8 of these hot dog buns into my nonstick pan. Ideally, I want them to rise up and kind of bake into each other so they have kind of squared off edges, and you're going to pull them apart once they're finished. Here's a trick I've seen in a couple of the videos from Sonora, Mexico. Usually they brush the tops of the doughs before proofing with a mixture of lard and oil. Since my kitchen is fresh out of lard, I am actually just brushing them with oil. This will help the dough to stop drying out while it's proofing. I'm just going to cover these up and let them proof for about an hour to an hour and a half. These buns puffed up nicely in the oven. They're doubled in size. I can tell they're going to bake up into each other and be those nice pull-apart buns that I'm looking for. Before baking, I'm just giving these a brush with egg wash. It's just 1 beaten egg, and I'm really wishing I didn't lose my pastry brush over the weekend. After the egg wash, I'm just going to move these to my preheated oven. It's preheated to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and I bake these for about 25 minutes until they're golden brown like this. These have baked up perfectly, and I'm really happy with them. I'm just going to move these to a wire rack to cool, and that's the Sonoran Hot Dog buns. I'm going to let these rest until it's time to cook the rest of the food. Now the pinto beans are pretty straightforward. I'm just putting 1 cup of pinto beans into a jar and covering that with about 2 cups of water, and I'm just going to let this soak overnight. The beans are apparently a lot better when you let them soak. These beans happily accepted most of that water overnight, and that's going to help these be a lot easier to cook today. When it comes to the cooking, I just rinse and drain the beans, then I covered them with about twice as much water as there was beans, which ended up being actually probably not enough water, so you could probably go more water with a bigger pot. Gave it a good pinch of salt and a stir, and then I just brought them to a boil on the stovetop. Then once they're at a boil, I lowered down the heat to low and let them simmer for about 2 hours until they were completely cooked. Once the beans were nice and tender and I could squeeze them between my fingers, I knew they were good to go. Then I just kept them on really low heat until it was time to make the hot dogs. Alright, it's condiment time. I'm making 3 homemade condiments from scratch, starting with yellow mustard. The recipe I'm using is in the description. Starting off with 3/4 of a cup of ground mustard powder. I'm using McCormick brand, but any kind of English or American style yellow mustard powder should work. Smells good. To that, I'm adding a 1/2 teaspoon of turmeric powder. That's going to give some deep yellow color as well. Then an 1/8 teaspoon of garlic powder and an 1/8 teaspoon of smoked paprika. Then I'm adding 3/4 of a teaspoon of kosher salt, or sea salt would work too. And then we're just going to stir all that together. Those dry ingredients are going to form the base of the mustard. To turn this from a powder into a paste, I'm adding 1 cup of cold water. Then I'm just going to whisk that together to combine everything. And then I'll bring it up to a boil on the stovetop. Once it's at a boil, I'll lower the temperature down to low and I'll simmer it for about 30 minutes. That's going to take the raw edge off of the mustard powder and bring all the flavors together. After 30 minutes, I got a paste that looked something like this, and my house smelled like mustard. So to turn this from a paste into the liquid bottled mustard that I'm familiar with, you just add a 1/2 cup of white vinegar. I'm just using white distilled vinegar, the regular kind that you buy at the store. super common, and then just stir that and continue cooking it on low until it becomes the consistency that you'd expect from a yellow bottled mustard. It took about 15 minutes of cooking on low to get the texture that I wanted, and I decided to transfer the mustard into this squeeze bottle, and I definitely could have used a funnel for this, but hey, I don't have a funnel. Once the mustard was in the bottle, I just wiped the bottle off and considered putting the cap on, but this mustard was too hot, so I decided to let it cool down with the cap off, and I just decided I would taste the mustard later once it cooled down. Now for the salsa verde, or the spicy green sauce, I'm using 7 tomatillos and 7 jalapeno peppers, taking the husks off of the tomatillos and removing the stems from the jalapenos. I'm not following a recipe for this, just kind of going with the flow. Decided not to remove any of the seeds from the jalapenos, so it's going to be kind of spicy. Just adding oil to a cast iron pan and putting all of these vegetables right into the pan. And I'm going to add a pinch of salt just to season these, and that's all the seasoning that this is going to get. Maybe a little more salt at the end. Putting these directly under the broiler in my oven, and I'm going to broil them on the first side for about 7 minutes at high heat. I am looking to get some char on there for flavor, and after 7 minutes I am seeing some char, so I'm going to do my best to flip these over with some tongs, just individually turning each of the tomatillos and jalapenos. Once most everything's turned with the raw side facing up, I'm going to put it back under the broiler for another 7 minutes. And then after 14 minutes total of cooking, the tomatillos have released a lot of their juices and everything's looking nice and charred and ready to turn into salsa verde. And for that, I'm just going to let these cool down a little bit before I blend them together into the sauce. All you need to do is blend these up in any type of blender. I'm going to be using my Immersion blender, so I'm putting them in this liquid measuring cup that's the perfect size for my Immersion blender. Here I'm just blending everything up on high speed, trying to be careful not to get juices out of the cup. And I'm leaving the texture a little bit chunky. You can see there's some texture from the seeds, the charred bits, and just from the peppers and the tomatillos, but I'm fine with a little bit of texture in this salsa. Just giving a quick taste test. It tastes bright and smoky, but I'm gonna put a little bit extra salt in this just to bring out the flavors a little bit more. With the seasoning added, I will stir this around a little bit and add this to another one of those plastic squeeze bottles, and that is the salsa verde. And now for the last of the homemade condiments, I'm making a homemade immersion blender mayonnaise. Mayo can be an intimidating thing to make at home, but as long as you have an immersion blender with the perfect size measuring cup like this, it's really easy. Just crack 1 egg into the bottom of your liquid measuring cup, and then I'm going to add a few seasonings that don't make or break this, but they give it a nice touch. Just adding a pinch of salt, a little tiny dash of smoked paprika, and then I'm actually doing a little bit of ground mustard powder to make this taste a little more like Hellmann's mayonnaise. Since the 2 main ingredients in mayo are eggs and oil, I'm getting a neutral tasting vegetable oil. I would not suggest using olive oil, it's usually too strong. I'm going to fill up the cup till I get to the 3/4 of a cup mark, so between the eggs and the oil, we're reaching 3/4 of a cup total. Then I'm just pressing my blender down and hitting the button, and I'm going to slowly raise up the blender as I'm blending. And it's going to emulsify the eggs and the oil together to create mayonnaise. So it takes in total less than 30 seconds, and I've got a thick and creamy mayonnaise from an immersion blender in this little jar. I'm doing this in real time, by the way, just so you can see that it literally just takes 30 seconds to make this mayonnaise in an immersion blender. All right, I'm going to take out the top and test for the consistency of this mayonnaise. The consistency was almost perfect. It's going to be a little bit less goopy than a mayonnaise that I'm used to from a jar, but that's what I'm fine with using an immersion blender. The problem with this was the taste. It was missing something, and then I realized I'd forgotten an important ingredient: 1 tablespoon of white vinegar. That's going to give it kind of a tang and zip that I'm used to from a commercial mayonnaise that I really didn't want to miss out on. So I just blended in 1 tablespoon of mayonnaise and gave it another taste. And this time it had the tangy, creamy, balanced flavor that I was looking for. So I bottled this one up in a plastic squeeze bottle as well, and this made much less sauce than the other 2. But that's okay, I think I'll have plenty for the number of hot dogs that I'm making. And that completes the mayonnaise and the 3 homemade condiments for the Sonoran Dog: mayo, salsa verde with jalapeños, and yellow mustard. I'm going to move these to the fridge and use them tomorrow when it's time to make hot dogs. Alright, it's Sonoran Dog Day, so I'm going to tackle these fresh ingredients. I'm using 1 white onion, about half an onion actually, and 2 Roma tomatoes. I'm just going to dice the white onion pretty fine, and don't judge my knife skills by the way. Real quick disclaimer, I'm not using any cooked, grilled, or sauteed onions in this recipe. I see them in a lot of other Sonoran Dog interpretations. Let me know if you think that's weird. I'm not using them, and I can definitely put them into the rotation next time. For this, I'm just using what Diego recommends, diced white onion and diced Roma tomatoes. There's our fresh ingredients. Now to assemble the hot dog, this big bun was the one I wanted to use. So I grabbed the biggest one I could, and even though I baked this yesterday, it's still soft, fluffy, and bouncy. I probably could have stored it in a plastic bag to keep it even softer. And here's a crumb shot of one of the hot dog buns for you crazy bread people like me. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel, by the way, for more bread, sourdough, and pizza videos. Okay, there seems to be some debate on how you slice a Sonoran dog, whether you cut down the center like that, or go on the side like an American-style hot dog. Diego went on the side like this, so that's what I'm going to try for this first hot dog. A few lessons I learned the hard way on this first one: don't cut too far down, because your hot dog might fall apart just as you're assembling the ingredients later. And then be careful when you're toasting your bun. You want to caramelize the edges and not over blacken it. That's what I did. So on the second try, I decided to cut down the middle to leave the sides flat. Those are going to be easier to caramelize later when you toast the bun. So that is how I'd recommend slicing the bun. And then for the bacon and the hot dog, I am not making these from scratch. My bologna and my hot dogs have a first name, and my bacon is Applegate brand, but you can use any brand of hot dog or bacon that you want. Then from Diego and a few other videos that I saw, they recommended just wrapping the hot dog the best you can, and then don't use a toothpick or anything on the end. Just wrap it and fold the end of the bacon under itself. Just like this, and then you will have a nicely rolled bacon wrapped hot dog. Just like they wrap them in Sonora and Tucson, probably. The next part is pretty easy. You just go on medium-low heat on your skillet, cook for about 2 minutes on each side of the bacon wrapped hot dog. At 2 minutes for 4 sides of the hot dog, it'll take 8 minutes a dog. So if you're making multiple, definitely make them all at the same time, or as many as you can, so it doesn't take you way too long. So cook all sides for 2 minutes. And then while the hot dog is cooking, it's time for Diego's awesome toasted bun trick. Just put a little line of that mayonnaise onto your bun and pop it right onto the skillet next to the hot dog while it's cooking. Keep an eye on this. If the heat is evenly distributed throughout the pan, it should probably take about 1 minute per side. Kind of move it around a little bit to make sure it's not darkening in one area. Check it occasionally and then flip it over once you've got another line of mayonnaise on the hot dog. Don't flip it without that mayonnaise, because that's going to give it the nice caramelized crust that you're looking for. So toasted for about 1 minute on each side should give you a nicely toasted bun. Remove that to a wire rack to cool. And then I also transferred the hot dog onto the wire rack to cool just for about a minute while I was prepping the other ingredients to go on top of the dog. So bun down and Sonoran Dogs assemble. Now is when it's really important that you didn't slice too deep into the hot dog bun, or else it could break apart while you're assembling it. So dog goes into the bun, topped with some of those warm beans that I was keeping in liquid at a really low heat so they would stay warm. On top of the beans, some of those diced onions, diced tomatoes on top of that. Now for the condiments, starting with a line of that homemade yellow mustard for tanginess, then a zigzag pattern of the homemade mayo for a creamy element, and then a few spoonfuls of that spicy jalapeno green sauce that was too chunky to squeeze out of the squeeze bottle. So can I make a better version of the Sonoran Dog at home? Did I improve upon Diego's recipe and the classic Tucson Sonoran Dog? Well, I think making so many of the elements of this hot dog from scratch really made a delicious hot dog that would impress people at a barbecue or a backyard cookout or anything like that. My wife really loved this hot dog. She took her first bite and was talking about how great it was before she realized she hadn't even bitten into the bacon wrapped hot dog part yet. So the fact that the bun and so many of the condiments were homemade really took this to the next level and made a great hot dog. But is it better? I will leave that to the people of Tucson to decide. They definitely know how to make a delicious and unique regional hot dog. If you're ever in Tucson, check out Buena Vida Restaurant or any of the other hot dog places you find throughout the city. And let me know in the comments below if you have another favorite regional style of hot dog that you want me to check out and try to make myself from scratch. I would love to do that. That is it for the Sonoran-style hot dog. I will see you in the next video.